You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody. Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream. Have you ever dreamt of hiking the AT? Bruce Matson did, so we're going to follow him every step of the way. Welcome back for what is the last regular show on Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream, sponsored by Trailtopia Adventure Foods. After 44 episodes and 27 weeks of hiking, we're going to talk with Bruce about the 100-mile wilderness where we left him last, and his journey to complete his quest up Mount Katahdin in Maine. Not every journey has such an epic conclusion, but this one really does. Finishing at Katahdin is a shot to the soul and embeds within you a memory that you'll always be recalling. Bruce mentioned recently how well he thought the trail was designed, and I couldn't agree more. It's as if a movie director asked for a really spectacular finish as somebody came up with a 100-mile wilderness followed by Katahdin. I was expecting to be able to talk with our man on the day. Indeed, I was set up and ready to record from about 9 o'clock in the morning. I had things to do and needed to go out, but I wanted to be there when he called. Nothing. Nada. At 4 o'clock, I'd had enough. I had to do a few chores. Then I started to worry. What if he'd fallen? What if he hadn't made it through the wilderness? What if Cheryl hadn't turned up? Then, at 9:36 on Saturday evening, he texted me in somewhat typical Bruce fashion. The text said simply, "Tomorrow morning? Summited this afternoon." That was it. He's a man with an economy of words when it comes to texting. So we were set for 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. We're going to have that conversation after this, the very last Trailtopia ad. Do you remember those times on the trail when you really needed to treat yourself? You know, those days when you fall in the mud or the rain starts running down your neck, the rocks are driving you crazy, or even when you're just fed up. You need a boost. When that happens, stop hiking. Take off your pack and treat yourself to one of Trailtopia's scrumptious desserts. Why not go for Rocky Road pudding? A rich chocolate pudding loaded with mini marshmallows and toasted slivered almonds. By the time you get that into your system, you're going to be warm, toasty and satisfied. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. So now, let's get to it and hear what happened in this dramatic final week of the hike. By the way, stick around at the end because I want to tell you about one last thing. Here's Bruce. So, guess who I'm speaking with again. Hi, Bruce. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, thanks.
Oh, that's great. Now, we're going to start with the spoiler question. Did you finish? When and what time?
I did finish. Finished yesterday, Saturday, September 1st. Uh-huh. And I don't know what time it was. My guess is it was probably... It was between 1 and 2 p.m.
All right, fantastic. Oh dear, we're going to come back to that obviously in a minute, but I'm actually going to try to keep the show in much the same format as normal, so as what people are used to. We're obviously going to talk much more about it. And first, we're going to start with a question from Ryan Hopkins. Ryan's been a very helpful guy to me. He's volunteered to help me with some social media. All his advice I've totally ignored so far, but I'm going to use it soon. His question was, if someone was only able to hike about a 100-mile stretch of the Appalachian Trail, which section would you recommend? And he's talking about, he wants to do a longer shakedown hike. He wants to find a section that gives a good variety of conditions and learning opportunities to prepare for a full through hike. Is there anything that springs to mind for you about 100 miles, maybe 150, maybe 75?
Yeah, what a good question. It depends on what it's for. If it's just I can only do 100 miles, what should I do? Then you should think about, what type of experience do you want to have? You could jump into the whites and have probably the most epic experience, but also the most difficult experience.
Sure.
But I think he said in the question, it really had to do with a shakedown hike. Obviously, in a shakedown hike, you want to learn a lot about yourself, your equipment and the like. and jumping into the whites or southern Maine would not be my recommended approach. So what I would do is I would go to a place like the Roan Highlands or Virginia, like the Shenandoahs, and you could appreciate how magnificent and beautiful the trail is and the experience is, because you want to experience that if you're really thinking about a through hike.
Yeah.
And as you know from earlier discussions, probably, they're different experiences, but the Roan Highlands may be my single favorite place, on the trail. So that comes to mind for two reasons. One is it is so beautiful. It's such a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
If you do a 100-mile section around there, you will climb some real mountains. You will get to experience the beauty of the Balds and that part of the world. And it's a really good section of trail in terms of variety and experience that would be useful in a shakedown. So that's what jumps to mind. And in a similar way, I think parts of Virginia, like the central Virginia, which I know well because I live near there, the Priest, Three Ridges area, and the Shenandoah, I think would be a lovely 100-mile hike to get you to be able to test your gear and the like. So those are the two that jump out at me. I wouldn't go to the whites or southern Maine and have that epic experience unless you're just really ready for it and it's the only 100 miles you're ever going to hike.
Yeah, I mean, that does speak to what you were saying last week, how well the trail, it's almost as if it's been designed to be in a certain way. The way in which the 100-mile wilderness comes at the end of the journey allows you to do your reflection. The whites are epic, and you're ready for the epic nature of that because you've done nearly 2,000 miles already. But my choice would have been the same as yours. I loved it round Roan Mountain. I love the Balds over there past Carver's Gap. I think it was just one of my favourite spots on the whole trail. So I agree with that. But I really want to back up now to the 100-mile wilderness where you started the week. And from my recollection, and easily my recollection, the early miles really are the toughest. How do they go for you, those early miles?
Yeah, let me make a comment generally about the 100-mile wilderness. Really was looking forward to it for a lot of reasons, obviously.
Sure.
I found the entire 100 miles to be much tougher than the press reports that I got. People had said, once you get through Whitecap, it's a flat pine needle path all the way to A-Ball Bridge.
Yes.
My hiking partner, G-Bolt, and I, headed out there with 6 days of food. We decided we wanted to spend the whole 6 days out there, sort of unconnected to civilization in a sense. So we didn't have food drops. We didn't do slack packs. Not that any of that is wrong or inappropriate. We just decided to do it sort of our way, if you want to call it that. But we found the 100-mile wilderness to be exceedingly tough. I mean, not that the climbs were harder than things we'd done elsewhere in southern Maine, the Bigelows, or in the White Mountains, but and this again, I know I'm kind of repeating this theme, but for me, and I think for listeners who are really thinking about doing this trip, the mental approach to a given day, a given task, is so critical to me and my happiness that I had a little mismatch again with expectations and experience.
Interesting.
The first day into the 100-mile wilderness was not particularly challenging in terms of elevation, but there was plenty of short climbs and short descents and rocks and roots, and we did 15 miles, and we were beat. And then the second day, we did the chairbacks, as you know,
yes.
And that was probably the hardest day of the 100-mile wilderness because we did climb, 4 peaks. In between the peaks and after some of the peaks, there were a lot of short ups and downs where you'd gain 100, 200 feet of elevation and then immediately give it back and have to climb it again. And there was small rock, scrambles and some ledges you were climbing over. And after doing 4 peaks and doing all these modest ups and downs, it was tough. And then if you recall, the descent from Chairback Mountain is nothing but a rock slide and a bunch of enormous angular rocks that were really, really difficult. So we were tired after the first day, exhausted after the second day. Then the third day, you do basically the 4 peaks of Whitecap Mountain, which weren't as tough as Chairback, but nonetheless, it was another 15-plus mile day, and it was tough. And then we finished that off by taking, the next day we did a 20-miler in an area that the elevation would suggest is relatively flat. And it was the most difficult section, not every minute of it, like, Pennsylvania has a lot of rocks, but it's usually not every minute, even in Pennsylvania. Well, we went through a section, the fourth day of rocks and roots that were, relatively flat, but they were so irritating and difficult and slow going that we had a tough day then. So no one listening who wants my thoughts on this should think that the 100-mile wilderness is a walk in the park. So we enjoyed it, but it was tough. We were eager to finish. We probably didn't, take it in and enjoy it as much as some people do. But it was quite an experience. It really was. Thankfully, I will say this, adding up the time just as we were preparing to go into the 100-mile wilderness through yesterday, believe it or not, we had 10 days of sunshine. And 2 of those days we had thunderstorms, both of which we missed, and I can go into that if it matters. But we were just blessed with incredibly good weather. And that meant that even though we had these tough days, when we were on Whitecap, when we were on
amazing, we
had really, really good views. So anyway, probably more than you wanted to hear about the 100-mile wilderness.
No, not at all. No, in fact, you know what? I think I agree with that, and I know that when you were preparing to go into it, and I remember feeling, we talked last week about what that feeling of almost accomplishment was, at Monson. And I'm always thinking, wow, that 100-mile wilderness is nowhere near as easy as they're all expecting it to be. It looks flat, as you say, but it really isn't. And do you recall that amazing view from when you come out of the woods suddenly onto barren ledges on Barren Mountain? Do you remember that?
I do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that extraordinary? I mean, that for me was one of the highlights of coming in an 100-mile wilderness. Just suddenly coming out, and there you are, got this incredible vista out there. And if you had lovely sunny weather, there is no better way to see it, I'm sure, because we had great weather that time as well.
We had great views. Very, very fortunate, very blessed to have the weather, the conditions, the views that we had, because we were working, in our mind, working pretty hard, and we took 6 days. A lot of people did it in 5, and some I talked to did it in 4, and I just don't know how you do it.
Well, I told you last week that woman Bethany Varner did it in 69 hours. It's ridiculous. I don't know how she did that either. Just extraordinary. Now, you said that you'd be reflecting on the journey quite a bit. Did it not pan out that way, or because you were working so hard to just do the hike? Or did you spend a lot of time on reflection?
It's a good observation, Steve. I didn't spend the time I thought I would spend. I certainly spent a lot of time, doing that, trying to do that. But we worked hard, and we were exhausted at night. So it wasn't quite as contemplative as I had thought it might be.
I'm sure. What about G-Belt? Was he also processing the whole thing, or was he similarly not struggling, but finding it tough the whole time?
Yeah, I would say we were in a very similar place. We were both, felt, blessed to be there. Yeah. We're surprised. In many respects, we thought there were plenty of, odds against us getting that far. So we were thankful to be that far. Yes. We both were talking day to day about, this is good, but we're ready to finish. And I'll tell you, having a hiking buddy is very valuable in my experience, certainly through Maine, because there were not even just days, but there were parts of days where he would be up and I'd be down and vice versa. And we really, picked each other up. I could sense that he was just fed up with rocks and roots. And for whatever reason, either because I thought it was my role or because it's just the way I was at that time, I might be up and I would, have encouraging words, and he would be doing the same for me. Because there are times when, I would just say, "Are you kidding me? Are we going to have another, quarter mile of this stuff again?" Because you do get frustrated when, it's like what it's like. The listeners really don't. It's like it's a quarter step followed by a long step, by a side step, by a short step, by a double step, by a long step, to a right step, to a high step, to a shuffle step, just to get through all that stuff. And it gets exhausting after a while.
It's like a dance lesson, isn't it, really? You move from one step sideways, one forward, one back. Oh, my gosh, I remember it well. Are you glad that you chose to do it that way, not to resupply and just stay away from everybody?
Yes. Don't regret the decision. Don't have any sort of judgment about anybody who does it a different way. We ran into a lot of people slack packing.
Right.
We ran into a lot of people. Actually, we didn't run into a lot of people. We ran into people slack packing. In fact, I've talking to you and talking to a guy at the end of the trail. I think you can actually slack pack the entire 100-mile wilderness, which shocked me because it's supposed to be a 100-mile wilderness. I think the sad thing, and again, this is not meant to be a judgment of any kind. I think the sad thing is the 100-mile wilderness is not a wilderness anymore. We had cell coverage many more places than they told me I would.
Right.
And there was more access than there was. We ran into a section hiker that we camped with a couple nights, and he was having a really hard time, and we were trying to help him out.
Yeah.
His phone lost its charge. He didn't have a map. He was worried about getting lost. And, I gave him my AWOL guide, and we were going to charge his phone that night, and then we didn't connect. And we ran into him the third day, and he was on the roadside, feet all blistered, but he had a ride coming to this remote logging road to
Sure.
get him out of the wilderness. So
Yeah.
It's really not a wilderness, but it's, I'm still glad we did it the way we did it.
Yeah, you did make it one, which is kind of nice. It's made me think about how I'm going to approach it next year as well. I definitely lost something of the wilderness by being slack packed, and I was aware of that at the time. So I'm going to consider doing what you did when I do it next year.
I would say this, Steve. If I did it again, and G-Bolt and I kind of agreed on this, I think it does mean you got a whole nother day of food, which, as you know, food becomes the heaviest thing in your pack.
Yeah.
I would take 7 days to get through the wilderness.
Wow.
I think I would have enjoyed the wilderness more, but we did 15, 15, 15, 17, 20, 10, or something like that to get through there. We did 15 the last day in the Bayball Bridge. But anyway, we had what were not, for a through hiker who's almost finished, 15-mile days with non-White Mountain type mountains is not a crazy distance, but they proved to be very, very tough days. And so if you back off the miles, I think you increase your happiness and you therefore increase your enjoyment of the 100 miles.
Yeah, interesting reflection, actually, that. And one last question about the 100-mile wilderness. How did you get on with the river crossings? Shoes on or off?
Well, it's funny, 2018 has a lot of things to be remembered for, the Crawfords, the new speed record, the horrendous winter we had, the snows, the record heat in New York. And I just saw, because I had a TV last night, I just saw that Maine is almost at a record heat level for the summer.
Really?
For the month of August. So
Wow.
we had an interesting year. Some good things, some not so good things. One of the things was that the Northeast, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, had a drought in the early part of the summer. And so there's about, you'll recall, 8, 9, 10 fords, streams and rivers you need to ford.
Seemed like about 30.
Yeah, for the listeners, where you have to walk through the water.
Yeah.
And some of the ultra lightweight hikers just march on through with their hiking shoes. Many of us will have something like Crocs and put them on, walk through the stream. And my videos will have a couple of these. We took some videos, walk through the streams, and then you put your shoes back on and keep hiking. We did only 4 or 5 of the 10 fords because the water levels were low enough. We were able to rock hop over some that in other seasons you would have to hike through.
I found them, they were okay, but I've seen some video of them. Some of them are just huge, aren't they? They're swollen water, and that's tough. And I saw the Crawfords crossing a couple, and they looked on video, and that looked pretty nasty as well. Now, so I know you've been up to Katahdin before, but seeing it from Abel Bridge, because when you come out the 100-mile wilderness, for people, just so they know, you kind of go along this road and you cross this bridge and you've got this incredible view of Katahdin off to your left. Was it, seeing it again from Abel Bridge, was that a real boost for you? Because it certainly was for me.
Absolutely. It was, G. Bolt and I looked at each other and said, we've seen this scene many times in photos, in YouTube videos, and we've seen the mountain, but we looked at each other and said, we really got here. We're here. This is unbelievable. Then add to that, as the listeners hopefully know, that scene is the scene that is the image for this podcast.
Exactly.
And so I've certainly been focused on that image in connection with this podcast. And then add to that, we had pristine weather. So we walk to the bridge. We have not just the view of the mountain, we have a beautiful view of the mountain. We come back at sundown, have another beautiful view of the mountain. And then we come back the next morning, because we stayed at Abel Bridge, and we have a sunrise picture of the mountain. And so it was a very exciting time to be at that spot. And the word I've used on my blog, I overuse this word iconic. There's certain iconic places and things on the trail. Yeah. And that certainly is an iconic view for anyone hiking the Appalachian Trail.
It definitely is, no question about it. So you went from Abel on I guess you must have then stayed there Thursday night, hiked to Baxter on Friday, I presume. Where did you spend your last night before summiting?
We were at the Birches campsite, which for the listeners is an adjunct annex sort of to Katahdin Stream campground inside Baxter Park. It's reserved for thru-hikers only. And we were able to stay there. There was a lot of news, and I won't say controversy, but a lot of anxiety about this past weekend, because every Labor Day weekend, the Penobscot tribe has an annual celebration and happens to be at Katahdin Stream campground. So there was a discouragement by the ATC and Baxter to have people like me actually summiting. I didn't break any rules. They made it clear that the Birches was still open. And I wasn't trying to summit on this day. It's just the way things rolled out.
Yeah.
But I think Baxter and the ATC did a good enough job getting the word out that we did sense from being around hikers at the end that some were rushing to summit on the 31st and others were pulling back to summit after the weekend. So when we went to the Birches, it's only has places for 12 thru-hikers. And there were only 5 of us there, and then one person rolled in late at night. So there was only 6 of us that showed up, really the next morning to hike the Hunt Trail and finish the journey. And quite frankly, there weren't many thru-hikers therefore on the trail yesterday when we did the final climb.
Well, funnily enough, one of our listeners reached out to me and sent me this message about what was going on this weekend, and I tried to reach you, and I called Cheryl. Did she get through to you, or did you already know about this weekend?
I did know about it. Lori at the ATC said, Bruce, that's not the weekend you want to summit. I said, yeah, I know, but it's just the one that works, and we haven't talked about it, but it's the weekend, and Cheryl probably could only come to visit on a weekend. And for a while, I was going to hang out in Maine for 1 week thereabouts until the 8th of September when Cheryl could come. But we moved it all around. We had a lot of logistical issues with the girls coming. So I decided, we just call it off. And then Cheryl sort of moved heaven and earth so that she could come and be with me this weekend. So we had to do it on a weekend anyway. And the way G. Bolt and I planned our last 10 days, it just kept coming back to the first or the second. So as it turns out, it was a busy day hiker day on the mountain because it was another beautiful day. But it wasn't any problem. And in fact, the Penobscot celebration, we knew this from speaking to the ATC in Monson, the Penobscot celebration is actually Sunday, Monday. So there wasn't any evidence of that on Saturday.
Oh,
so
right. Okay.
it was not a big deal that we were hiking, through Katahdin Stream and up the Hunt Trail yesterday.
Now, so let's talk about the day then. And Cheryl was with you. What time did the three of you set out to start up the trail?
Yeah, so probably Cheryl had to be there by 7 just because of their parking rules. She was able to get a reserved parking space, which is really key because there weren't many. This whole thing wouldn't have worked without her sort of being on the computer at the right time. But she rolled in at 7, and we started hiking about 7:30.
Right. And so how did she find those early miles? Because your legs are fine by now, aren't they? But, there's quite a bit of scrambling going on quite early on as well, isn't there? Yeah,
you get a mile or two of pretty nice trail, and it just starts to gradually get steeper and steeper and steeper. Cheryl's, is very fit. She loves to walk. She walks every day. She works out every day. And I thought she had the physical strength to do it. So, and she's not a complainer. So I don't know if she was suffering at all, but and I'll diverge for a minute. When we came down at the end of the day, I didn't remember how long and steep the climb was below the tree line. You certainly understand the climb above the tree line. And I kind of said to Cheryl and BG Bolt, I said, I don't remember this being so steep for so long on the normal trail. And I think part of it was just the excitement, the energy. We knew we were finishing. And I think we kind of ran up that trail. We probably, Cheryl never really huffed and puffed or complained, but we probably pushed her a little quicker than we should have because I think we were energized. So anyway, the hike up went really well. It went well. And then, of course, then you hit the scrambling, which is, it's a scrambling at epic proportions.
It is, isn't it? So it's exciting. I found that one of the most exciting parts of the trail, just that because you knew what was at the end of it, that scrambling up and pulling yourself up. How did you all cope with that?
It was hard. And Cheryl's, again, loves to hike, very fit, but she doesn't love heights. And there's a lot of, pushing and pulling and climbing and crawling and some pretty dicey, we'll just say, acts that you have to go through. In fact, there are places, as there was throughout the trail, particularly in the Northeast, where I'm surprised there aren't a few more, handholds or rebar or some assistance. But we got up, we had to help each other, and we got up there. We took our time. We always said we had all day. We would take the time we needed. We'd live through this hike and a lot of dangerous spots, and we weren't going to do anything crazy the last day. So I thought we had a very nice, fun morning getting up to the tableland.
Yeah, because the tablelands you can ease off. I seem to remember thinking, we're virtually done now, but the hills kept cresting ahead of us, and you thought it's going to be the sign will be here soon, and they're like these false summits all the time. You keep going up and up and up, and then you see more of a summit further and further up. Did seeing the sign eventually have a real emotional impact upon you? Because I say you've seen it before. How was it when you first saw the sign?
Yeah, once you come through what they call the gateway, when you leave the really steep part and hit the tableland, that's the first time you see the sign in the distance, and you really can't see the sign. You can see because it's such a place that people congregate. You can kind of see these little tiny figures up there, and that was the first time I said, "Gee, we're really here." But then when you get maybe the time that made the biggest impact on me was maybe we were 0.2 or 0.3 away, and you really could see the sign.
Yes.
And I did have that moment. I won't say it was a huge emotional moment, but I did have that moment that I had throughout the day and the week. Really was. It's really hard for me to believe that I'm here. It's such a long journey. It was so difficult. It was almost surreal to be there and to realize there's the sign and I'm really going to finish this thing.
Yeah. And when you actually get to it, you get right in front of it and you touch it. Is there one initial thought that you had? Was it a prayer? What was it?
Yeah, it was. It really was the thing that all I could really think about. Coming up there and having Cheryl and G-Bolt with me, sort of amplified this. And my real thought was just one of gratitude. Just being thankful. For the support and encouragement from Cheryl, hooking up with G-Bolt to finish this trail when I needed that camaraderie and that support. And, quite frankly, when I look back on the trail and I would think about different places and time, being in the cold in Tennessee, or being in the rain in Virginia, or being in the rocks in Pennsylvania, there are times where I kept thinking, how did I ever actually finish this thing? I'm not sure I'm capable of doing it. And, for, person of faith, it's really, I really do believe that God helped keep me going, provided this protection and provision throughout the hike, and that I didn't get there on my own. And I got there because of God's providence and the best family in the world and the best friends in the world.
Oh, so it was so cool. Were there any almost momentary regrets that it's over?
I have not had that sense. I know a lot of people say, it's sort of like, you Brits say, king is dead, long live the king.
That's
it's
right.
Like the trip is over. I'm sorry, it's over.
Yeah.
I don't want this to come out wrong. I don't regret a minute undertaking this task, and I'm going to love the experience for the rest of my life. But it was very difficult, and I still, as I say, don't even know how I was able to finish. So I'm glad it's over right now.
Yeah.
But as I've said before, I've analogized to the best I can this hike to a marathon. And there were moments and issues in a marathon that I think are relatively good analogies to the long distance hike. And as I've said before, every time I've finished a marathon, and I've always said, I've always hurt, I've always been tired, and I've always said, I'm never doing that again. And then for some reason, within a couple of weeks, the allure of the challenge and the experience kind of creeps back in, and I've signed up for another marathon.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think you're going to see me sign up for the PCT or anything long distance, but I do think, knowing myself, and I've always had this dream to do some hiking in the Sierras, in the West, because I've never really experienced that. So try to think about myself and knowing myself is I could see in a year or two trying to do the John Muir Trail, because it's a reasonable length, and it would give me a chance to really experience that beauty of the western part of the country that I've never really experienced the way you do when you kind of go live in it for a while.
Sure.
So that would be sort of my reaction to, I'm glad it's over. I'm eager to get back to family and friends and different things that I have going on in Richmond and elsewhere. So I don't really have a regret for leaving the trail right now.
But we're going to do one more program, by the way, which will be probably at the end of September, when you've been home for a month. I'd like to do this sort of a reflection, but as you stand one day after having done it, less than a day after having completed it, is the AT what you imagined it to be, or was it much more than you imagined it to be? Because you've read about this stuff for years, haven't you? You've read about it, you've prepared for it. Was it how you imagined it in your mind it was going to be?
It was largely how I imagined it would be in my mind.
Right.
The one thing that I miscalculated was how hard sections of it were. I knew it would be hard, period. I always said in the early podcast, this will be the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yep.
I was right about that. This is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Sure.
I knew that there would be moments, you can't spend that much time away from family, out in the woods, without having moments where you get down. I knew that would happen. And obviously, just how do you react to that?
Yeah, you managed that really well, generally.
Thank you. But the thing that I did not calculate well was how really hard certain sections of this trail are. And it sounds like you're trying to convince an audience that you're this wonderful hiker and you're amplifying how hard it is. I really don't want it to come out that way. But unless you go out there and do this, I don't think you really appreciate how, for me, how hard this was at certain times when you're climbing some of those mountains in the whites, dealing with rocks and roots. And some of the challenges out there far outstrip my expectations, even though I did a lot of reading and preparation.
Yeah. Well, look, A couple of quick more things to say. Firstly, did you know this dream now to do this, to return to Katahdin, has been 44 years? Was it 1974 you said you heard Warrendore?
That's correct. That's correct.
And,
yep.
Of all things, I only realised it this morning, this episode that goes out today, or tomorrow in fact, is episode number 44. Who would have thought, eh?
Yeah, and imagine that, Steve, and you still don't believe in God after that.
You're absolutely right. I don't. But now, what I also want to say to you is, enjoy talking about this for the next few months because people will want to listen. The problem is when their eyes start glazing over, you'll know that your audience has gone. They're over it, and you never, ever, ever will be. So enjoy that while you can, because this is going to stay with you forever. And people. It's only when you start talking to people who actually have done it or want to hear about it that, or they've got some experience of it, then your eyes light up and their eyes light up. But you're going to become an Appalachian Trail bore like I am, like everybody else has done it. I think. And the last question is, when's the book coming out?
Yeah, there'll probably be more than one, but yeah. Sure. Probably, I don't know. I would think in the spring.
Yeah.
Probably it'll be something. So right now I've got, one the sort of the preparation and planning book.
Sure.
is far along, but the whole hike experience and reflections on the hike book is only in my head right now.
Of course it is. Yeah. Well, look, I'm especially proud, obviously, that you've done this. That we were connected. We had a beer a year and a half ago in a local bar where you were coming down to see your father, and we started talking about this, and it's over. So isn't it amazing that we've had this journey together, and hopefully, and I know a lot of listeners have followed along because there are more than 1,000 downloads for every single episode. So I think that's great, and I've really enjoyed talking with you, Bruce. But we will catch up one more time, say in about a month's time, all right?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, it is pretty amazing, and somehow we got to the finish line.
Exactly. Okay, buddy. Well, say hi to Cheryl for me, and we'll speak soon. All right. Enjoy your rest.
All right.
Because you'll need it. All the best then.
Very good.
Cheers.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Bye. So that was it. As he said, he'd summited, and the 44-year journey came to a close in episode number 44. We both loved Ryan Hopkins' question about a great 100-mile section, and both had similar thoughts. Thanks, Ryan. Don't forget to send me your address. And while we're on the subject, I don't believe that I asked for Janet Brady's address last week. Let me have it if you can, Janet. That 100-mile wilderness really hit you hard at the end. As Bruce said, on the map it looks fairly benign after the first few days, but it always retains your concentration. Seeing Katahdin looming closer at certain points is an added bonus, though. And hats off to Cheryl for doing the whole up and down of Katahdin. That is no mean feat, even when you've already done 2,000 miles. She hadn't. Well done, Cheryl. Now, two last things. I know I said one, but I lied. If you've enjoyed listening to Bruce's story and have had enough of hiking podcasts, then well and good. But if you think this is something you quite like, I have another couple of shows going on. Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail is the flagship show of the network, with nearly 350,000 downloads, while Trail Dames is a newer show with just 5 episodes currently. If you go to hikingradionetwork.com, that's hikingradionetwork.com, you're going to find all that we have to offer. By the way, I'm Mighty Blue, and my show will be relocating for a few weeks in October and November as I hike the Camino de Santiago in Spain. I'll be podcasting from the trail, and if that's successful, I'll be doing the same thing when I go for my second Appalachian Trail thru-hike next March. One last thing that I wanted to mention, what I was referring to earlier, was that there will be one more RTK episode. I want Bruce to have the chance to take everything in for about a month, and we'll be recording a show that includes his reflections, Cheryl's thoughts, and G-Bolt's impressions of concluding his journey with our guy. That show will be released exactly 1 month after Bruce summited, on Monday, the 1st of October, so look out for that. Thanks again to all of you who have lent me your ears to talk to this past 9 months. It has been an absolute privilege. Bruce and I will see you next month.